Hello friends and welcome to my new video. In today's episode I'll be talking about a filmmaker who really needs no introduction amongst movie lovers of popular Hindi cinema. He was a man who constantly reinvented himself, constantly kept moving with times, and made cinema that was relevant for the audience who were watching them, no matter what time period that audience might be from. I say time period because this filmmaker I'm going to talk about is perhaps one of those very few filmmakers who remained relevant and eminently watchable almost through his entire career, which is a rare feat. He is someone who started his filmmaking journey in the late 50s, and from the 50s to the 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, up to 2012 when he passed away. He kept on making movies which the audience saw, liked, appreciated, and which is what made him one of the finest and most relevant filmmakers for popular Hindi cinema in India. And the gentleman I'm talking about, as you would have guessed by now, is none other than Yash Chopra. Now Yash Chopra came from a family where cinema was quite strongly there in the mindset, at least of his elder brother, Baldev Raj Chopra, B.R. Chopra. And B.R. Chopra had his banner and had his umbrella under which Yash Chopra developed and grew and became a filmmaker. And the first film that Yash Chopra made was for B.R. Films, and it was the wonderful Dhool Ka Phool, which spoke of an illegitimate child. And Dhool Ka Phool didn't commercially do very well, although Yash Chopra was noticed for his kind of filmmaking. His initial films, I think mainly due to the influence of his elder brother B.R. Chopra, had a lot of social significance and social messages which were very strongly represented on screen. Following Dhool Ka Phool in 1961, Yash Chopra made the criminally underrated, according to me, Dharamputra, which I think is a great film. Dharamputra had Shashi Kapoor in one of his, I think, earliest appearances as a leading character, and it also won the National Award for Best Film that year. Following Dharamputra, Yash Chopra made, which I think is the first ever multi-starrer film in the history of popular Hindi cinema, and that was the star-studded Waqt. I read somewhere that the original cast of Waqt was to have Prithviraj Kapoor as the father and the three Kapoor brothers, Raj, Shami and Shashi, as the sons who get separated, and how they unite again, forming the crux of the story. But I don't think that would have been a very wise decision, and fortunately Yashji didn't go with that decision. Of the Kapoors, the only Kapoor who was there in the film was Shashi Kapoor, and with a star cast of Balraj Sahani, Achla Sachdev, Rajkumar, Sunil Dutt, Shashi Kapoor, Sharmila Tagore, Sadhna, Rahman. It was a fabulous entertainer, some great chart-busting numbers, and Waqt went on to become this super-duper hit. I think after Waqt, Yashji did a couple of more films with PR Films, one of which was the great suspense movie, quite an innovative movie, even by today's standard, called Ittifaq, which had the then new Rajesh Khanna and Nanda in the lead roles. And Ittifaq was this movie based on a Gujarati play, and it was a movie based on the events and happenings of one night, and it was primarily shot inside one room of a house, and it was one of those rare films of the time that didn't have a song. No song was there in Ittifaq, and it didn't even have an interval. The duration of the movie was so short that they didn't need an interval. So these were some of the unusual things about Ittifaq. Again, I think a wonderful movie. And after Ittifaq, he made Aadmi Aur Insan, the movie starring Dharmendra, Saira Banu and Feroz Khan, and Mumtaz in an important role. And I think that was one phase of Yashji's career, his work with B.R. Chopra, under B.R. Chopra, and all the movies that he made for B.R. Films. So that was an integral part of Yash Chopra's growing up years as a filmmaker, his development as a maker. Then in 1971-72, Yashji broke away from B.R. Films to start his own banner, Yash Raj Films. And the first offering he gave us under that banner was Daag, a beautiful film starring Rajesh Khanna, Rakhi and Sharmila Tagore. Now Daag was this this romantic film with a lot of drama and some good plot twists. There are references to the Mayor of Canterbury, and it did relatively well at the box office. It actually helped in stopping the fall that Rajesh Khanna, the then superstar, was experiencing in his career. And it was a very good movie to have made under your banner as a first film. Following Daag, Yashji also collaborated briefly with Trimurti Films, Gulshan Rai in particular. They were good friends, and the two of them got together to make movies like Joshila, and then of course the super successful Diwar with Amitabh Bachchan, Shashi Kapoor, written by Salim Javed. One of those iconic films which sort of define the angry young man image of Amitabh Bachchan. Following Diwar, he continued his association with Gulshan Rai, and almost the same team made Trishul. Amitabh, Shashi Kapoor, Salim Javed, Gulshan Rai. The same team actually also made Trishul, which was again a huge hit. But Yashji also kind of continued the journey with his own production house, Yash Raj Films. And, alongside Diwar, almost simultaneously, he also made Kabhi Kabhi, the lyrical, beautiful, romantic drama. So, that was Yash Chopra. His passion for cinema was really the main thing, and there was not one type of movies that he specialized in. He could make cinema of all types. And sometimes, when I read about him today, I get surprised that he's branded King of Romance, and Yash Chopra meaning chiffon saris and sunset and soft romance and great music, which is true. There's no doubting that. If you see his movies like Chandni and Silsila, of course it is true. But if you really go through his filmography in detail, there's so much more to Yash Chopra than just a romance filmmaker or a romantic filmmaker. There's much more to Yash Chopra than just romance. And as his films like Dhul Ka Phool and Dharamputra, Waqt, Diwar, Trishul, these prove that he was Ittifaq, that he was just more than a filmmaker who specialized in romance. Yashji, after Trishul, I think made one of his better films with Amitabh Bachchan, according to me, Kala Patthar, which sadly didn't set the box office on fire. But again, a great look at the lives of workers in coal mines in India. I think that was a great film. Following Kala Patthar, Yash Chopra also made Silsila. I think one of the first films to speak about extramarital affairs and marital infidelity. Silsila was, of course, more in the news for the casting coup that it appeared to have with its lead characters, Amitabh Bachchan, real-life wife Jaya Bachchan, and supposed real-life lover Rekha, reprising their roles for the movie. Silsila was, it was shot beautifully, had some wonderful, great music. There were some absolutely superb scenes, fantastic performances, not just by the three main characters, but by some of the fringe characters like Shashi Kapoor, Sanjeev Kumar. So it had everything going for it, but somehow I felt the script was faulty and it sort of didn't live up to the hype that it had promised. And Silsila didn't do well at the box office. Following Silsila, I think Yashji's career went through a slump, and there were movies where either his heart wasn't there or he was caught in that zone of uncertainty where he didn't know whether he should follow his heart or follow box office diktats. And films like Mashal, which was brilliant in parts, especially the performance of Dilip Kumar. But films like Mashal, then Vijay and Fasle and Parampara, these were movies which just were not quintessentially Yash Chopra movies, and they all fumbled at the box office, didn't do well. But then he came back with a movie which perhaps defines him the most, and the stag of king of romance and sunsets and chiffon saris and bangles and love songs and rose petals, everything that's associated with Yash Chopra perhaps really got strengthened with the super success of Chandni. And all these things that I mentioned was what Chandni was about. It was a love story, and it was a love story made in true Yash Chopra style. Sridevi putting in perhaps the performance of a lifetime with Rishi Kapoor, Vinod Khanna, Anupam Kher, in great supporting roles. And Chandni turned out to be this huge, huge hit towards the end of the 80s when mostly action films were doing well, and Chandni was one of those love stories which really, really hit the bullseye and the audience's imagination. And I think the success of Chandni was such that from then on, that tag of king of romance just stuck on to Yashji, at times making people forget of how versatile he was as a filmmaker and not just a king of romance. So, interestingly, after Chandni, Yash Chopra made what was, I think, the film closest to his heart, and definitely the favorite amongst a lot of his fans. It was a movie called Lamhe, which again had Sridevi in the lead role along with Anil Kapoor. But unfortunately, Lamhe didn't do very well at the box office. And I think Lamhe, released in 1991, was released about 25 to 30 years before time. because had Lamhe been released today, it would have met with a very different fate at the box office. It's one of those classical, ahead of its time movies. But what a beautiful movie Lamhe was. Yash ji continued his journey, and as I said, for a filmmaker who started in the 50s to remain relevant in the 90s with movies like Dar, where he really established that negative image of Shah Rukh Khan as the obsessive lover. And, after Dar, he made a completely different movie again with Shah Rukh, which was Dil To Pagal Hai. And it took some people like me a while to realize that Dil To Pagal Hai was actually directed by Yash Chopra and not his son Aditya Chopra. So youthful, so exuberant, so young in feel and look the movie was. So here was a man, who was in his 60s when he made Dil To Pagal Hai. He was in his mid-60s when he made Dil To Pagal Hai, and yet it appealed to every youngster who saw the movie. So I think that was the wonderful thing about Yash Chopra. He lived with times, and he adapted and adjusted and remodeled himself decade after decade to stay relevant in the minds and hearts of Hindi popular cinema audience. And as I said at the beginning of my episode, that there are very few filmmakers who can successfully boast of having significant movies made from the 50s till the 2010s, which is what Yash ji did. Even following Dil To Pagal Hai, he made movies like Veer Zara and Jab Tak Hai Jaan, and he just continued his journey till life stopped him. He passed away in 2012, just when he had finished Jab Tak Hai Jaan, and apparently he had announced his retirement, saying that Jab Tak Hai Jaan would be his last movie. I don't know whether he would have been tempted to make a comeback after that. Fate didn't allow us that chance to know. And Yash ji, at the young age of 80, left us in 2012. But he's left behind a legacy. He's left behind a body of work, which, if nothing else, shows his versatility and shows his passion and his love for filmmaking. And I think that's what came across in every cinema of his. His belief in the kind of movies he was making, his passion for his art is what came across. And his choice of subjects, as I said, was so varied that it's very difficult to bracket Yash Chopra as just a romantic filmmaker or anything like that. Now, in a body of work as vast and diverse as Yash Chopra's, difficult to choose favorites, but I do have some favorites of mine, and if I had to choose my top 7 films of Yash Chopra, they would be in this order. At number 7, I would have Chandni. As I said, a romantic movie, a quintessential romantic movie, and I think the movie Yash Chopra is identified with the most. That would be at my number 7. At number 6, I would place Kala Patthar, because I think it's one of the finest portrayals of angry young man by Amitabh Bachchan. One of the really great scripts written by Salim Javed, and Yash ji's depiction of that entire coal mine scenario and those various little characters who form the story is simply fabulous and unforgettable. So Kala Patthar would be my number 6. At number 5, I would have a movie again which is really, really close to my heart, and that is Kabhi Kabhi. Kabhi Kabhi, I think, is one of the best films about human drama and love and family ties and relationships. And it's so intricate. It's so there is this beautiful maze of characters and situations which Yashji creates in Kabhi Kabhi, and there is this lingering and enduring lyrical feel about Kabhi Kabhi which just makes it timeless. Performance-wise, some absolutely fabulous performances by Wahida Rahman, Rishi Kapoor, Neetu Singh, Amitabh Bachchan, Rakhi, and of course my favorite in Kabhi Kabhi is Shashi Kapoor. I thought he just ruled over everyone else in Kabhi Kabhi with that fantastic author-backed role. So Kabhi Kabhi would be number 5 in my list of top Yash Chopra movies. At number 4 would be a film which I said at the beginning of my show, a very underrated movie, and which is Dharamputra, the story of this young man brought up by Hindu parents and grows up to be a Hindu fundamentalist who hate Muslims, only to find out that by birth he is a Muslim himself. Shashi Kapoor is excellent. He is absolutely excellent in Dharamputra. And it's sad that despite, winning the National Award for Best Cinema and everything, somehow the movie gets lost in Yash Chopra's magnificent filmography. Dharamputra is not a movie which too many people talk about. It's at number 4 in my list. At number 3 is, again, the very unusual, the very gripping, the very intriguing Ittifaq. Songless thriller. A songless thriller was made by his elder brother, B.R. Chopra, called Qanun. And Yashji followed that up with Ittifaq, starring Rajesh Khanna and Nanda. And it's a really gripping film about incidents of a night. And it's just so intriguing and gripping that even today when you see it, you just can't take your eyes off it. It's that well made. Ittifaq is at number 3 for me. At number 2 is the iconic Diwar, and what does one say? It's perhaps the most perfect screenplay written by Salim Javed, with every dialogue just etched in our consciousness. For all lovers of popular Hindi cinema, Diwar is an iconic movie, and it's the movie I refer to when people, when I keep hearing people saying Yash Chopra, king of romance, and I just quietly remind them that look here, he also made Diwar. One of the best dramatic movies. And Diwar just has one action scene and maybe half an action scene towards the climax. So, there's not a lot of dishum or fighting in Diwar. But what a dramatic, what an emotional, what a brilliant movie Diwar is. It's at number 2 in my list of Yash Chopra favorites. And which leaves me with, the undeniable number 1 in my list, which is Lamhe. Lamhe is this absolute gem of a movie, and superbly written by Hani Irani, and the performances of Wahida Rahman, Anil Kapoor, and of course Sridevi. It's just a beautiful, beautiful movie. So ahead of its time, so misunderstood at the time it was released by the public in general. But it remains. It was, I think, a movie which was closest to Yash Chopra's heart as well. I've read a couple of interviews where he's mentioned that, and not without reason. It's such a beautiful movie. It's such a gorgeous movie. It has to be my number 1 Yash Chopra movies. So, these were my top 7 films made by Yash Chopra. Yashji, started a film banner, a production house, which today is one of the leading production houses in Indian cinema, Yash Raj Films. He managed it successfully for such a long time. He gave breaks to other directors, directors like Ramesh Talwar and others who who made successful movies under the Yash Raj banner. Movies like Dusra Admi and Nakhuda and Sawal and Noori, a lot of successful movies. And then with the arrival of Aditya Chopra on the scene with Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, which again is an absolutely iconic film. Yash Raj Films, almost like its founder, like Yash Chopra, remains relevant, keeps on reinventing, keeps on changing with times, catering to audience need, and continue to be, as I said, one of the largest film production companies in India. And credit to Aditya Chopra for keeping the banner alive and giving us so much new talent in terms of heroes and heroines and filmmakers. And that's an ongoing journey which Aditya Chopra does, and it's perhaps the best way to keep the legacy of Yash Chopra etched in our minds forever by continuously reinventing, reworking, making movies relevant for the audience of that time. So that's the legacy of Yashji, which is so wonderfully being carried forward by his son Aditya Chopra. I could go on and on talking about Yash Chopra because his work is so rich, his films are so layered. There are so many aspects of his cinema, be it the storytelling, be it the music. Yash Chopra movies had a very special kind of music to them, and it sort of reflects his own taste in music and his own deep love for music. Whether it is Khayyam Saab in Kabhi Kabhi, or it is R.D. Burman in Diwar, or it is Shiv Kumar Sharma and Hari Prasad Chaurasia, the two maestros of Indian classical music. They made their commercial Hindi cinema debut with Silsila and carried on composing for Yashji's films, and absolutely fantastic music. And of course, Yash Chopra used the old unused tunes of Madan Mohan so effectively, so beautifully in Veer Zara. An absolutely fabulous, completely different kind of movie which just belonged to, almost seemed as if Madanji had composed those songs for Veer Zara. That's how well they fitted. So Yash Chopra had that grand sense of music, and so, as I said, I could go on and on talking about Yash Chopra and never end, because there's so much to speak about him as a filmmaker. But I'll stop here because I think I've said a lot about Yashji, and I'm sure most of you watching this video are also fans of the movies of Yash Chopra. But just in case you've missed out a few movies that I mentioned here, because a couple of movies are not that well known compared to his other movies. So if you haven't seen Dhool Ka Phool or Dharamputra or Ittifaq, do watch it and discover yet another side of this brilliant filmmaker, Yash Chopra. That's all for this episode, and until the next time, bye for now.